Imagine waking up in a world that feels familiar, yet unsettlingly strange. The streets, the conversations, even the faces you see, all seem to carry hidden codes. Every gesture, every word, every symbol around you is more than what it appears. Each is a fragment of a language you barely understand. You reach for meaning, only to discover that meaning is not fixed. It is constructed, and yet invisible. It shapes the world you live in. This is the world Ernst Cassirer spent his life decoding. A world not built merely by facts or raw experience, but by symbols, the silent architects of human consciousness. Cassirer, a philosopher in early 20th century Europe, did not write for casual amusement. He lived in a time when ideologies clashed violently, when symbols became tools of power and fear. Yet, instead of succumbing to despair, he dedicated his intellect to understanding how humans perceive reality itself. He asked a question both simple and terrifying. What if reality as we know it is not a neutral reflection of nature, but a creation of the symbolic forms we inhabit? Language, art, myth, religion, science, all these are not just ways to communicate. They are frameworks that shape thought, emotion, and behavior. They are the lenses through which humanity interprets the world. To grasp Cassirer's insight, consider an ordinary object, a flag, for instance. A flag is merely cloth and color, yet in the human mind, it carries a universe of meaning, loyalty, nationhood, sacrifice, even obedience. Change the symbol, and the world it represents shifts too. What Cassirer discovered was that every aspect of culture operates on this principle. Symbols are not passive, they are active forces, shaping perception and guiding decisions, often invisibly. Think of myths that govern societies, rituals that reinforce hierarchies, or the stories nations tell themselves. Without understanding these symbolic forms, humans remain blind participants in their own history. Cassirer's journey was also a personal odyssey. Born in Germany in 1874, he navigated an era of philosophical giants and turbulent political landscapes. He saw the rise of nationalist fervor, propaganda, and authoritarian regimes that weaponized symbols to manipulate entire populations. In a world where words could ignite war and images could command loyalty, he pursued a radical idea. Humans are essentially symbolic creatures, and understanding the architecture of symbols is key to understanding ourselves. His work combined philosophy, history, and psychology, offering not only intellectual frameworks, but tools for deep introspection. What does this mean for us today? Pause and consider the everyday world. Advertisements, political speeches, social media posts, news headlines, all operate as symbolic systems. Even our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are filtered through symbols, shaping reality before we even consciously perceive it. Cassirer's work reveals that to navigate life intelligently, one must learn to decode these layers of meaning, to see the invisible codes that govern perception. This is no abstract academic exercise. It is a survival skill for the modern human mind, exposed to endless streams of symbolic influence. As we embark on this exploration, imagine peeling back the familiar veneer of reality. Every story you have been told, every ritual you participate in, every social convention you obey, is part of an immense symbolic network. Cassirer teaches us to question it, to recognize it, to understand its power. In doing so, we do not merely see the world, we see the architecture behind the world. And in that understanding, a profound freedom emerges, the freedom to perceive, interpret, and perhaps even reshape the reality around us. Humans are not merely animals responding to stimuli. They are creatures who live within layers of meaning, constantly interpreting, constructing, and reinterpreting the world around them. Ernst Cassirer called this distinctly human faculty the realm of symbolic forms. To understand humanity, he argued, one must understand the symbols through which we perceive, imagine, and communicate. These symbols are not decorative. They are the scaffolding of reality itself. Language, myth, art, religion, and science are not optional adornments of life. They are the lenses through which life becomes intelligible, coherent, and emotionally resonant. Language is the most immediate and pervasive symbolic form. It is not merely a tool for labeling objects or transmitting facts. It shapes thought itself. Words are carriers of meaning, but they also guide perception. Consider the difference between calling an event a rebellion versus a revolution. The choice of words frames the reality, dictates the emotional response, and even influences memory. Every conversation, every story, and every law embodies this principle. Humans cannot experience reality without the mediation of language. Words construct categories, assign value, and create the invisible rules by which society functions. Myth, too, is a symbolic form with immense psychological and cultural power. Myths are not lies or mere fantasies. They are structured narratives that convey moral, emotional, and existential truths. Ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Greece, encoded their fears, hopes, and social hierarchies in myth. The hero's journey, the creation of gods, the battles of light and darkness, all these narratives communicate values and identity, guiding both individual behavior and collective imagination. Modern media, films, and literature continue this tradition, subtly reinforcing shared ideals and cultural assumptions. Art offers another lens through which humans construct reality. Paintings, music, sculpture, and architecture are not only aesthetic expressions, but symbolic systems that encode emotion, perception, and ideology. Consider Renaissance frescoes, which combine scientific perspective with religious storytelling, subtly teaching both cosmology and morality. Art shapes not only what we see, but also how we feel and interpret experience. A painting does not merely depict a scene. It mediates reality through form, color, and symbol, allowing viewers to inhabit an entirely constructed world. Religion, too, operates as a symbolic form, offering structure to existential questions and moral dilemmas. Rituals, ceremonies, and sacred texts encode symbolic meaning that guides behavior, binds communities, and conveys ethical frameworks. Even in secular societies, quasi-religious symbols persist in traditions, national holidays, and shared cultural narratives. Cassirer argued that these symbolic forms are not relics of superstition, but essential mechanisms through which humans make sense of existence, creating stability and coherence in an otherwise chaotic world. Science, surprisingly, is also a symbolic form. While it presents itself as objective, scientific knowledge depends on systems of symbols, mathematics, formulas, diagrams, and conceptual frameworks. Newtonian mechanics, quantum physics, or evolutionary biology all rely on symbolic constructs that shape perception and understanding. These symbolic forms are not neutral. They define what can be observed, measured, and comprehended. In this sense, science is both liberating and limiting. It expands our knowledge, while simultaneously constraining it within frameworks that are themselves human-made. Across history, these symbolic forms have interacted, overlapped, and sometimes clashed. Renaissance thinkers combined mythic imagination with scientific inquiry. Enlightenment philosophers debated the balance between reason and tradition. Every era, every culture, has negotiated the tension between human creativity and the invisible codes that guide thought. Cassirer's insight was that these forms are not simply tools, but environments within which human consciousness develops. To navigate life intelligently, one must recognize the scaffolding of symbols, the invisible architecture behind everyday perception. The psychological impact of these symbolic forms is profound. They shape identity, emotion, and cognition in ways that often escape awareness. A child raised in a culture with certain myths and rituals internalizes the symbolic framework, which then governs perception, thought patterns, and values. Adults, too, remain embedded within these symbolic systems, often mistaking the constructs for reality itself. Politics, media, and marketing exploit this principle constantly, using symbols to influence opinion, shape behavior, and guide emotional responses. Awareness of symbolic forms, therefore, is a form of cognitive liberation, a method for stepping outside the unseen rules that dictate perception. Cassirer's philosophy reveals a tension central to human existence. We are both creators and captives of symbolic forms. Our minds generate meaning, yet we are constrained by the systems of symbols we inherit. Freedom, in this sense, is not absolute. It is exercised through awareness, through the capacity to perceive the symbolic architectures shaping experience and to navigate them with intention. The question Cassirer leaves us with is simple yet profound. Are we truly free? Or are we living within an invisible world of signs that governs thought, belief, and action? Understanding symbolic forms is not only a philosophical pursuit, it is a practical guide to self-awareness, social critique, and conscious living. The invisible architecture of reality, Cassirer teaches, is everywhere. Every word we speak, every story we hear, every painting, ritual, or theory we encounter participates in a vast web of symbolic influence. To decode this web is to understand the human mind and the society it creates. It is a journey into the hidden mechanisms of perception, a path toward both intellectual and psychological clarity. Cassirer's work challenges us to see reality not as a given, but as a construct, an ongoing negotiation between symbols and consciousness, and ultimately, a reflection of what it means to be human. Symbols are not merely passive reflections of reality. They are the invisible threads weaving together the fabric of human civilization. Throughout history, entire societies have been shaped, directed, and even controlled by symbolic systems that govern belief, behavior, and power. Myth, religion, art, and science did more than inspire. They created the frameworks within which humans understood their place in the world. Cassirer's insight reveals that to study history is to study the architecture of symbols, the hidden currents that guide civilizations silently, often unnoticed, yet inexorably. Consider myth and religion, which have served as powerful instruments of social cohesion and political legitimacy. In ancient Mesopotamia, the divine right of kings was legitimized not by force alone, but by the symbolic weight of mythic narratives. Rulers were cast as chosen by gods, and their commands carried moral and cosmic significance. Similarly, medieval European society relied on religious symbols, cathedrals, rituals, relics, to structure life, instill obedience, and define social hierarchies. These symbolic systems encoded rules of behavior and belief into the minds of individuals, ensuring that societies functioned according to invisible codes that were understood, internalized, and rarely questioned. Art, too, has historically reflected and reinforced hierarchies of power. Renaissance painting was not simply aesthetic, it was a medium for social instruction. Frescoes, sculptures, and commissioned portraits codified authority, morality, and cultural ideals, conveying complex societal values to a largely illiterate population. Even seemingly personal or creative works carried subtle messages about power, identity, and social order. In these ways, symbolic forms became instruments not only of understanding but of influence, shaping the way people perceived themselves and others within the broader social structure. Science, often regarded as neutral and objective, has also functioned as a symbolic system with profound cultural implications. Scientific classifications, measurements, and theories have historically reinforced social hierarchies and political agendas. Colonial powers, for instance, used scientific taxonomies to justify domination, racial hierarchies, and economic exploitation. Rationalism and empirical methodology brought clarity and progress, yet they also imposed mechanistic interpretations of life, stripping human existence of its symbolic richness. Cassirer warned that an obsession with rationalist reductionism risks turning society into a world of calculations and instruments, alienating humans from the deeper symbolic realities that give life meaning. The 20th century offered striking illustrations of how symbols could become instruments of mass manipulation. Totalitarian regimes, from Nazi Germany to Stalinist Russia, weaponized symbols to control thought, shape ideology, and mobilize populations. Flags, anthems, parades, and propaganda films were not merely ceremonial. They were psychological levers, conditioning emotions and reinforcing obedience. By manipulating symbolic forms, regimes could create collective realities, erasing individual perception and substituting a socially constructed version of truth. Cassirer's work anticipated these dynamics, revealing that symbols are never neutral. They possess the capacity to shape belief, manipulate behavior, and structure societies in profound and sometimes terrifying ways. Even in contemporary life, these lessons remain painfully relevant. Social media platforms, advertising campaigns, political messaging, and viral memes all function as symbolic systems that guide perception, emotional responses, and social norms. Like their historical predecessors, these modern symbols are designed to influence, persuade, and sometimes control the collective consciousness. Individuals rarely notice the subtle power of symbols shaping their thoughts and desires, yet these symbolic currents determine choices, preferences, and beliefs in ways both conscious and unconscious. Understanding the historical patterns of symbolic influence is essential to navigating a world saturated with mediated meaning. Psychologically, symbols operate on both conscious and unconscious levels. They shape identity, evoke emotion, and guide behavior without explicit recognition. Humans internalize symbols through culture, tradition, and education, absorbing norms and values that become part of the self. In this sense, the symbolic infrastructure of civilization is not external. It is internalized, forming the lens through which individuals perceive reality. Those who recognize this architecture gain a unique advantage: the ability to question assumptions, reinterpret narratives, and act with conscious awareness, rather than being passively shaped by inherited systems. Cassirer's historical perspective encourages reflection on the choices societies make regarding the symbols they elevate and the narratives they preserve. Symbols can inspire creativity, solidarity, and ethical conduct, yet they can also be exploited to manipulate, divide, and dominate. Awareness of this duality is crucial for both intellectual inquiry and moral judgment. By tracing the evolution of symbolic systems through myth, art, religion, and science, we see a recurring pattern. Civilizations are built, sustained, and sometimes undone by the symbols they create and obey. Ultimately, the study of historical symbols illuminates the profound interplay between culture, consciousness, and power. It challenges us to ask difficult questions. Are our beliefs truly our own, or have they been shaped by inherited narratives? Are our social structures neutral, or do they encode invisible codes of compliance and hierarchy? By understanding the symbolic foundations of civilization, we gain the capacity to see not only the past, but the present with clarity, revealing the subtle forces that continue to guide human thought, emotion, and action. Symbols are the puppeteers of human civilization, quietly orchestrating the dramas of society, history, and culture. Recognizing their influence is not merely an academic exercise. It is an act of liberation. It allows individuals to navigate the world with awareness, to question inherited narratives, and to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of meaning. In the hands of those who understand them, symbols can illuminate the mysteries of humanity. Misunderstood, they can ensnare entire societies in invisible webs of power, obedience, and illusion. Today, symbols are no longer confined to temples, books, or galleries. They saturate every corner of human life, shaping thought, perception, and behavior in ways both subtle and profound. Social media posts, advertisements, political campaigns, trending hashtags, even emojis. These are the modern equivalents of myths, rituals, and sacred texts. In a world of constant connectivity, symbols act as invisible forces, influencing decisions, beliefs, and identities. We live in an age where the architecture of reality is increasingly constructed by digital signs, viral narratives, and algorithmically curated experiences. Consider the viral image, or meme. A single photograph can evoke outrage, joy, or fear in millions, bypassing reason and appealing directly to emotion. Symbols condense complex ideas into instantly recognizable forms, creating shared understanding without dialogue. A flag waved at a protest, a logo flashed on a billboard, a trending hashtag on social media. These symbols perform the same function Cassirer observed in historical myths and rituals. They coordinate collective behavior, shape identity, and guide perception. Yet, unlike the myths of the past, these symbols are instant, mutable, and global, capable of reaching billions in seconds. Advertising, too, operates as a modern symbolic system. Brands do more than sell products. They sell identity, aspiration, and emotional experience. A commercial is rarely about the object itself. It is a narrative encoded in symbols, colors, music, words, and images that shape desires and reinforce social norms. Consumers absorb these symbolic cues almost unconsciously, internalizing narratives about beauty, success, or morality. The psychology behind this influence mirrors the mechanisms of myth. Repetition and emotional resonance cultivate familiarity, trust, and obedience. Humans, it seems, are wired to respond to symbols, often without recognizing that they are being guided. Politics has become a theater of symbols as well. Campaign logos, speeches, rallies, and media imagery are carefully constructed to convey power, legitimacy, and moral authority. Leaders harness symbolic forms to unify, inspire, or manipulate populations. Even language itself is weaponized. The choice of words frames issues, defines enemies, and constructs reality. Freedom, security, patriotism. These are not just concepts but symbolic tools that evoke emotion and direct action. Propaganda, once the domain of totalitarian states, now exists in subtler forms, embedded in memes, social narratives, and news cycles, shaping perception on a global scale. Artificial intelligence introduces a new layer of symbolic influence. Algorithms analyze human behavior, predict reactions, and present curated content that subtly guides perception and decision-making. Recommendation systems reinforce preferences, echoing existing beliefs and values, while suppressing exposure to conflicting ideas. In this sense, AI becomes an active participant in the symbolic ecosystem, mediating reality through patterns, data, and predictive symbolism. The human mind increasingly interacts with reality not directly, but through the filters of digital symbols, creating an experience shaped as much by algorithms as by the physical world. Psychologically, these symbolic forces operate on multiple levels. They influence identity construction, conformity, and social cohesion, often outside conscious awareness. People align themselves with ideologies, trends, and online communities, guided by symbolic markers of belonging. Likes, shares, comments, and reactions act as modern rituals, reinforcing participation and conformity. Emotions, attention, and values are constantly mediated by symbolic forms, creating a reality that is simultaneously personal, social, and manufactured. The modern individual navigates a dense web of symbols that shape perception in ways both empowering and constraining. Cassirer's insights resonate profoundly here. Just as ancient myths and rituals created collective consciousness, today's symbols construct our sense of self, community, and reality. Yet the speed, scale, and invisibility of digital symbols make them more pervasive than ever. The challenge for modern humans is to recognize this symbolic architecture, to distinguish between conscious choice and conditioned response. Awareness becomes a form of resistance. To see the symbols shaping thought is to reclaim some measure of autonomy, to navigate a world not as passive subjects, but as conscious participants in its creation. The philosophical implications are unsettling. Are humans more aware of symbolic manipulation today? Or are we blind to it, mistaking curated perception for reality? Every social post, news headline, or viral video becomes part of a constructed environment, a symbolic ecosystem that frames values, emotions, and decisions. Understanding this ecosystem requires the same intellectual curiosity and psychological awareness that Cassirer applied to historical symbolic systems. Without this awareness, we risk surrendering agency to invisible currents of influence, obeying narratives and patterns we do not fully perceive. Yet there is hope. Symbols can illuminate, inspire, and connect, not just manipulate. Awareness of symbolic influence allows for discernment, critical thinking, and creativity. By studying the symbolic structures around us, we gain tools for self-reflection, social critique, and conscious participation in culture. The modern symbolic age, while pervasive and complex, also presents opportunities to shape perception consciously, to resist manipulation, and to construct meaningful realities of our own choosing. In this context, Cassirer's philosophy becomes more than historical theory. It is a practical guide for living in an age dominated by symbols. The world we inhabit is not a neutral reality. It is a web of constructed meaning, an intricate network of signs, narratives, and rituals. Understanding this network is not merely intellectual. It is essential for navigating life with awareness, integrity, and freedom. Symbols, once decoded, reveal the hidden mechanisms of influence, power, and human psychology, offering insight into both the world and the self. Living in a symbolic age means confronting uncomfortable truths, that much of what we perceive, believe, and desire is mediated through signs and codes. But it also means discovering agency, the capacity to see beyond the constructed reality, to interpret symbols consciously, and to participate in shaping meaning rather than being shaped by it. Awareness is liberation. Understanding symbols is empowerment. And in a world saturated with influence, those who perceive the invisible architecture of reality gain the power to navigate it with intention, insight, and intellectual freedom. To see the world as Cassirer did is to awaken to a reality hidden beneath the surface of daily life. Symbols are everywhere, woven into language, art, politics, rituals, and the digital landscapes we inhabit. They are not merely tools of expression. They are the very scaffolding of thought, perception, and emotion. For centuries, humans have constructed their worlds through symbols, often unaware of the invisible architecture guiding their choices. Understanding this structure is not an abstract intellectual exercise. It is a journey toward freedom. Cassirer's philosophy offers a profound insight. The mind is simultaneously creative and constrained. We invent meaning, yet the systems of symbols we inherit shape, limit, and even dictate our perception. To navigate life intelligently, to act consciously rather than reactively, one must recognize the frameworks shaping thought. Language, myth, art, religion, science, and now digital culture all form an interwoven network of influence. They define what we see as real, desirable, or true. They create the invisible boundaries of our mental and emotional landscapes. Awareness of these boundaries is the first step in transcending them. Freedom, in Cassirer's sense, is not an escape from society or culture. It is a conscious engagement with the symbols that construct our reality. It is the ability to distinguish between inherited narratives and chosen beliefs, between conditioned reactions and deliberate thought. Every act of recognition is an act of liberation. When one sees the world as a network of symbols rather than an objective reality, the power of unconscious influence diminishes. Myths and rituals no longer govern blindly. Art and media are no longer passive forces. They become dialogues, challenges, and mirrors for self-reflection. This awareness reshapes the human experience. Everyday life, once a series of automatic responses to inherited symbols, becomes a landscape of possibility. Decisions are informed not only by circumstance, but by insight. Beliefs can be questioned, narratives reinterpreted, and values consciously chosen. In recognizing the symbolic nature of our environment, we gain the capacity to shape it rather than be shaped by it. The power that symbols exert over thought and behavior becomes visible, tangible, and negotiable. Yet there is a tension that Cassirer illuminates. Humans crave both freedom and order. Symbols provide structure, continuity, and meaning, but they can also constrain imagination and enforce conformity. Totalitarian regimes, ideological movements, and mass media exploit this tension, manipulating symbols to guide thought and behavior. The challenge of living consciously in a symbolic world is to navigate between these forces, embracing the guidance that symbols offer while resisting the unseen chains they can impose. In the modern age, this challenge is magnified. Social media, algorithms, branding, and global communication create layers of symbolic influence that operate at unprecedented speed and scale. Emotional, cultural, and cognitive frameworks are shaped not only by personal experience, but by curated narratives designed to manipulate perception. In this context, Cassirer's insights are more vital than ever. Seeing the symbolic patterns embedded in our reality is not merely a philosophical endeavor. It is a necessity for intellectual and emotional autonomy. The journey toward this awareness is profoundly personal. It requires reflection, curiosity, and courage. It means questioning the assumptions that underlie beliefs, values, and social norms. It means distinguishing between inherited frameworks and consciously adopted meanings. It means recognizing that much of what we perceive as reality is constructed, mediated, and encoded in symbols. And it means understanding that the mind, once aware, is capable of reshaping these symbolic frameworks, choosing which influences to accept, challenge, or transform. Ultimately, the freedom Cassirer describes is the freedom to perceive consciously, to act deliberately, and to interpret meaning with insight. It is the liberation from unconscious obedience to inherited codes. It is the capacity to live in the world while seeing the threads that weave it together, to engage with society while remaining aware of the invisible currents shaping thought and behavior. It is the recognition that while symbols construct reality, humans remain capable of interpreting, critiquing, and recreating it. As we reflect on the life and work of Ernst Cassirer, we are left with a profound question. If our world is built on symbols, and we are constantly navigating a network of meaning, how consciously are we living our lives? Are we passive participants, guided by invisible scripts, or are we aware architects of the reality we inhabit? The answer shapes not only our understanding of society and history, but our own capacity for autonomy, creativity, and insight. To see the world through Cassirer's eyes is to embrace both the challenge and the liberation of symbolic awareness. It is to acknowledge the invisible structures that govern thought and behavior, and to step into the possibility of conscious engagement. It is to recognize that reality is not fixed but mediated, not given but constructed, and that our greatest freedom lies in perceiving the architecture behind the world we inhabit. In understanding symbols, we do not merely decode reality. We reclaim the power to navigate, interpret, and shape it with clarity, purpose, and profound awareness.